Hi, I'm Camille.
And I'm Rachel, and welcome to this week's episode of Food Science. This is the first of our 2 Christmas-themed episodes in which we're going to be investigating the properties behind and making some of our favorite treats to have around the holidays.
On this week's episode of Food Science, we're going to be making delicious eggnog from scratch. It's a cooked eggnog. And it's actually not that difficult once you understand the processes behind making eggnog so that you're sure to not curdle it.
So to understand what can go wrong with eggnog and how we can avoid that happening, we are going to talk a little bit about the properties of the different components in eggnog. Now, the 2 main ones are milk and alcohol. Now, milk is 87% water, and the other 13% of it is made up of fats and proteins. And the 2 main proteins that we have in milk are casein and everybody's favorite, whey. So it's about 80% casein, and what casein does in milk is it typically travels around in small clumps known as micelles. And although these are traveling together in groups, they're not in very, very big groups, so we don't have any problems with the texture of milk. However, when it's introduced into an acidic environment, these clumps can join together into even bigger clumps in order to avoid being destroyed by the acid environment, and this results in curds. Milk's acidity is a pH of about 6.7, which is just a little bit more acidic than neutral water, and milk curdles at a pH of 6.5. So this is a really delicate balance. And the reason why things can go terribly, terribly wrong is that alcohol tends to be very acidic. Now, pure alcohol is actually completely neutral. However, the booze that we like to drink, like bourbon or brandy or whiskey or anything like that you add into eggnog, has a lot of other stuff in it aside from just the alcohol components, and that makes it very, very acidic. Actually, to the point of giving it a pH of about 3 or 4, which is not quite hydrochloric acid that burns your skin, but it's very acidic.
Really close.
Really close, you can die. Not really. But, so when you're making eggnog, if you add the alcohol component just straight to the milk without doing anything to it, especially if you're adding it to just skim milk, it will curdle immediately.
It will end up a mess.
And it's gross, and nobody wants that. Most recipes actually recommend using a large portion, or at least a partial portion, of heavy cream in addition to the milk. And this just provides a higher fat content, and the fat provides a buffer, so that when you add things like booze that are very acidic to it, it is more resistant to a change in pH. The other way we can fix it is by adding the alcohol very last. After we add all the cream to it, we add the milk, we add the sugar, we add the eggs. There are a lot more components in it that make it more resilient to changes in pH. So then when we slowly add the booze later, we make sure to do it in a gradual way, and then we don't have any curdles. So 2 most important things: high fat content and making sure you add the booze last, slowly and evenly distributed. And with that being said, we get to actually start to learn how to make eggnog. Right, and pass it over to Camille.
Awesome. So now that we know the process behind what goes wrong with eggnog, we're going to show you how it can go right. And if you'd like to make it, we will have the recipe included in the description. So the first step is to beat the egg yolks, which we've already separated from the egg whites. So first I'm going to pour those into a medium mixing bowl, and I'm going to beat using a hand mixer until they change color. Once your eggs have lightened in color, if you can see that there, you're going to start gradually adding a 1/3 cup of sugar into the mixture and continue beating. Timing is really important with the recipe, so if you dump all the sugar in, you're not going to get the right consistency, and it's just not going to turn out well for you. Once all the sugar is combined, you're going to set aside this egg and sugar mixture. I'm going to be adding the whole milk, nutmeg, and heavy cream into a pan. And then I'm going to be putting this over a high heat and bringing it just to a boil. I am going to let this mixture mainly just heat by itself, but I will also be stirring it occasionally. So just as your mixture starts to come to a boil, you're going to remove it from the heat, and then you're going to temper it into your egg mixture. So this is important because if you add it all at once, you're going to end up scrambling the eggs, and that is definitely not what you want in eggnog. So as you add, you're going to want to stir. Once you've tempered your milk into your eggs, you're actually going to be pouring it back into your pan. And then we're going to bring this milk and egg mixture to 160 degrees. And then remove it from the heat and set it aside while we whip our egg whites. Our mixture's already hit 160, so I'm going to remove it from the heat and actually pour it into a separate bowl that I'm then going to refrigerate until I need. Before we put our finished milk and egg and sugar mixture into the fridge to cool, right after we've taken off the heat, we are going to gradually add the bourbon and the rum as we continue stirring.
As we mentioned before, this is important to do a little bit at a time, and we did it last to make sure that we don't have any curdling milk as a result.
Now, if you're thinking that 2 shots of alcohol for 6 drinks is a little bit on the lighter side, you can certainly try your hand at, once again, gradually adding alcohol to your own drink once you have served it, but that would be at your own risk because the milk might curdle. But like you were saying to me earlier, it turns out curdled milk isn't actually bad for you.
That's true. There's a lot of concerns about it that curdled milk will make you sick, but actually, if you think about it, the first place that milk goes once you consume it is your stomach, and your stomach is an incredibly acidic environment, and so that milk ends up curdling in your stomach anyway. So if you do get some curds in your eggnog, it's not the end of the world. You can of course take them out if you want to, but if you end up ingesting a little bit of it, it's not going to make you sick since that's the natural process that your body does with milk anyway. Alright, now that it's all mixed in, we're going to go put this in the fridge.
While our mixture is chilling, we're going to be beating our egg whites and then gradually adding sugar.
Eggs are really interesting, and we're actually planning on later doing an episode entirely devoted to the different ways that we prepare eggs and why it is they react differently. But when you're making a meringue in the way that we are making right now, having the mixer plugged in is super important.
I mean, that's step number 1.
But when you're creating egg whites, what you're doing as you whip the eggs is you're causing the proteins in the eggs to unfold and disconnect from one another.
Safety first!
And as you're separating them, you're also adding a lot of air into the mixture as well, and so when those proteins refold, they're refolding around those air pockets, which of course makes a very nice and fluffy result. Now, I'm sure anybody who's done egg whipping before has at one point over-whipped their eggs, and what's happening there is once you continue to whip eggs beyond the point of perfect peak stiffness, as we like to refer to our whipped egg whites.
Literally peaks.
Literally peaks. What you're doing essentially is you're making all of those bonds in the eggs stronger, and as the bonds in the proteins in the eggs become stronger, it actually starts to reject the water that is, naturally existing in egg whites. Eventually, the water gets kicked out, and you get this separation of these gritty protein and this liquid on the side, which you don't want. So it's important to stop at the exact right moment.
So as with everything in life, don't overdo it, or you'll end up eating an omelet instead of drinking eggnog. To see whether your whites are whipped perfectly, you're going to stick your blade in, lift it out, and if they stick in those little peaks there, you have achieved whipped egg whites. Now, with Rachel's assistance, I will be gradually adding a tablespoon of sugar to the mixture as I continue beating it until stiff peaks form. So, unlike the soft peaks, they will be more stiff, more stable.
What a great explanation!
You'll see it when I do it.
I think those are pretty stiff.
Stiff peaks. So, with the addition of sugar, our mixture has gotten a lot glossier, and when the peaks form, they hold their shape for a lot longer since they are now stiff. Yay! Now that we have formed our meringue and chilled our mixture, we are going to whisk the meringue into the rest of the ingredients, and Rachel is going to once again assist me with that. Oh, look at it, it's so fluffy.
Essentially what adding the beaten egg whites does is it makes it a little bit thicker, a little bit lighter, less heavy,
Which, you know, it's pretty heavy considering how much cream and whole milk that we put into it.
And it gives you that nice, like, thick eggnog texture that you really associate with eggnog.
Yeah. It's, like, silky, it's smooth, and just all around delicious. And so, now that we've got our finalized product, let's try it.
Okay.
Moment of truth for it.
This is supposed to make 6 to 7 servings. So if you want to make enough for a party, we recommend doubling the amount in the original recipe. But cheers.
Cheers. Ahaha.
And happy early holidays.
Happy early holidays, you guys.
Thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode of Food Science. Join us again in 2 weeks for our next Christmas-themed episode in which we'll be making holiday cookies.
So many cookies. And also, be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up to date with all of the videos. Bye!